Minister, as we approach the end of what is the school year in many primary schools, I want to acknowledge the hard work of many school principals and teachers, but I do want to highlight an issue here tonight, and that's the issue in regard to the overload on principals, particularly teaching principals. I met with many school principals in my own county of Offaly, and they tell me that the workload is absolutely excessive, that it continues to be extremely bureaucratic, and that it's leading to burnout. Many teachers can't focus on teaching and learning. They're pulled in so many different directions in terms of admin. Teachers have pointed out to me that their management doesn't just extend to the school team, as in the mainstream teachers and pupils, that they also have EAL teachers, SNAs, many ancillary staff coming in and out of the schools. So I think this is an issue that we really do need to get to grips with, or we're going to see more of an exodus of school principals, particularly teaching principals from our schools. So I want to focus tonight on, I suppose, research that has been done and indeed solutions at the end of my contribution. But I want to point out that in April, the Irish National Teachers Organisation's INTO passed a motion at its annual Congress about the unsustainable workload facing school principals. The resolution finds that the current demands and expectations placed upon principals are unreasonably high, raising serious concerns about burnout and long-term sustainability in leadership roles. And there have been ongoing calls made for an immediate review of the special education allocation model, and that's causing huge frustration, and I have raised it in this House before. And certainly it's putting serious pressure on primary school principals, who are often left scrambling for resources in order to meet the needs of students with complex needs. I have engaged regularly, I want to say, also with the National Principals Forum, and I want to thank them for their great work in highlighting the many issues that exist in terms of teaching principals. But in terms of the bureaucratic burden, the NPF recently conducted a survey on the impact of the SET allocation model, which I just referred to, and they conducted the research with over 550 primary school leaders, and this concluded that 71% believe that their SET allocations for the 2025-26 academic year are inadequate to meet their school's needs, but that the majority of principals and school leaders describe the process, and this is the important piece, the process is chaotic, stressful, ridiculous and frustrating. So I really think that we need to take on board what has been said to us by school leadership. A recent survey also by TUI found that the ever-increasing workload, particularly that of a bureaucratic nature, continues to be a demoralising factor, and that forces many teachers out of the profession. So I really do think that we need to get to grips, and I have a document here in my hand tonight. It's called The Primary School Leadership, The Case for Urgent Action, a Roadmap to Sustainability, published by the IPPN, and that is very revealing. This report is extremely revealing. It actually highlights that there is an inordinate and disproportionate focus on managing the organisation, and that this disproportionate increase in focus of managing the organisation without a corresponding increase in management supports and resources undermines the capacity of school principals to deliver the greater focus on leading teaching and learning. And indeed, the Chief Inspector also contributes to this, and a report from him dated between 2016 and 2020 also concludes that this review, that there is a disproportionate focus on management and administrative tasks that diverts principals from their key leadership responsibilities and undermines their effectiveness as instrumental and indeed as institutional leaders in the school community.
Thanks, Deputy. The Minister to respond.
Thank you very much, Carol Nolan, and thank you, Deputy, for raising this. This is an issue that's raised with so many of us in this House by principals up and down the country whose jobs are constantly evolving and constantly getting more challenging. And I really do appreciate you raising this here today. The role of schools within communities is crucial, and the Minister for Education and Youth, on whose behalf I'm taking tonight's topical issue, wishes to acknowledge the huge contribution being made daily by all school leaders in the operation of our schools. International evidence is clear on the vital impact that school leaders have on student outcomes and on leading teaching and learning in our schools. To ensure that our school leaders are supported in an increasingly complex environment, both now and into the future, department officials are examining how best to support school leaders. A review of leadership supports, as committed to under the Programme for Government, is currently in development, and I hope that is welcome news for you, Deputy, given that that was the thrust of what you asked for this evening. This will examine current resourcing, it will examine distributed leadership, it will examine administrative and advisory supports and professional learning supports for school leaders. Extensive consultation with stakeholders will inform this work. The numbers employed in our schools will reach the highest ever level in this current school year. There are over 42,900 teaching posts allocated across the primary school system, and this represents an increase of just over 5,000 teachers when compared with the 2019-2020 year. In 3 of the recent budgets, prioritisation was given to reducing the pupil-teacher ratios in primary schools 1 point each year, which has brought the teacher allocation ratio to an average of 1 classroom teacher for every 23 pupils in all primary schools. That is the lowest level ever seen at primary level. In addition, the threshold whereby a teaching principal becomes administrative principal has been reduced from an enrolment of 176 pupils to 169 pupils. And I know that's something you'll be particularly interested in, given you queried in particular the role that teaching principals have and the workload that they have. Budget 2022 ensured that each teaching principal with a minimum of 1 release day per week became a permanent feature in all schools. So schools with 1 special class received 4 additional release days, while schools with 2 special classes have administrative principal status. As well as general teaching posts improvements, a new leadership framework introduced back in 2017 allowed for flexibility in identifying and prioritising the evolving leadership and management needs of a school. And this shared leadership model supports school leaders in the overall management and operation of schools. It provides for the assignment and the reassignment of post holders to specific roles and responsibilities to meet a school's evolving needs. Today, 1 in 3 primary school teachers hold management positions. Budget 2024 provided for an additional 500 Assistant Principal 2 posts for the current school year, while Budget 2025 provided for the equivalent of 500 Assistant 2 posts being distributed as 110 Assistant Principal 1 posts and 251 Assistant Principal 2 posts for the purposes of fully restoring all posts of responsibility in primary schools. A revised post of responsibility schedule issued to schools in April just gone in order to reflect the increase in posts of responsibility available to schools for the coming school year. In examining leadership, the Department of Education and Youth is acutely aware that we need to protect what works well in our school systems and what serves so many of our young people so well. We want to build on the strengths of the system and address challenges that will support our school communities and be responsive to the needs of students in a really increasingly complex world. And the Programme for Government commits to a trial of new administrative support for principals and for Board of Managements to assist with demands faced and to support school leaders in rebalancing some of their time to leading, teaching and learning. And planning for this trial is now at an advanced stage.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Nolan.
And Minister, I certainly do welcome those improvements that you just listed, but I think in order to tackle the bureaucratic nightmare that currently exists, that there are decisive solutions that could be taken. For example, there is a pilot of small school scheme. I completely welcome that. I think that that is certainly one solution. That if that was to be rolled out nationally, where schools form clusters and they support each other with admin, I think if that was rolled out, as I say, nationally, but also if the threshold where it stipulates that it's for a school of 4 teachers and under, if that was increased also, it would capture more schools and indeed would support more schools. But I suppose just to give you an idea of how bureaucratic it's becoming, I mean, since 2006, there's on average 44 circulars being issued to schools. Now, that is a huge workload to land on any principal's desk, and that is just one layer of the workload that exists. But I do think, as I say to you, that if we were to look at the small school scheme, roll it out nationally, extend it to more schools, and as I say, support teachers, and look at the situation where teachers are managing a huge number of people, that it's not just mainstream teachers, as I say, it's extended to SNAs, ancillary staff. We need to look at all of that, and I think we need to tackle the bureaucratic nightmare quickly, efficiently and effectively before we have, unfortunately, more principals leaving the post. Because I think, it is time that we put more solutions in place and that we allow teachers do what they do best and what they signed up to, which is to teach. That's what they're passionate about. And I know myself from being a former school principal, we had to do revenue returns, we had so much landing on the desk, and unfortunately that situation has only got worse in the last number of years. So I think certainly, as I say, I know there's clusters in Galway, in Donegal, in Mayo of this pilot. I think extended nationally, it would be one way of helping principals.
Thanks, Deputy Minister.
Thanks very much, Deputy, and thank you for sharing your own experience, which is so relevant. I mean, ultimately, the existing models of leadership and of governance in our schools, they place a burden on school principals as well as boards of management and the sector as a whole, and it's a very difficult balance to be able to strike to get the appropriate level of checks and balances, which are so critical, both for our students and for the industry, and to make sure that we're not overburdening principals in particular and those who are school leaders. I guess recognising these challenges, the Department of Education and Youth is now putting an increased focus on leadership and governance at school level and across the sector nationally. And department officials, in conjunction and in consultation with education partners, are currently examining the current policies and practices to see what elements are serving school communities well and what elements can be improved on. I mean, you put it very well yourself when you said we want teachers to do what they do best, to teach what they're passionate about and to be able to do that in school, and we really do want to empower them to be able to do that. You mentioned the Small Schools project, and just to give you an update on that, feedback from the schools, the 26 small schools, has been really, really positive, and that's reflected in the interim evaluation report, which is due to be published by the department shortly. And the independent review identifies potential areas for closer collaboration and an analysis of the scalability of actions already undertaken. So there will be evaluations as it continues, but I suppose just to give you the reassurance that it will form a strong basis that will inform future policy in relation to the direction for all small schools, and that feeds into the delivery of this important programme for government commitment that we have. It's currently trial roles in relation to new administrative supports. There are currently trial roles being actively recruited in 2 of the 6 clusters, which I think is really interesting too. So we'll be able to evaluate that, we'll be able to look at that. That's going to look at things like leadership and governance, both at primary and post-primary level, but it's all going to be about supporting school leaders and school communities better. And I think, as you say, that small schools pilot is going to be really interesting for us to learn from and to hopefully be able to get learnings that we can roll out right throughout Ireland.
Thanks very much, Minister. Thanks, Deputy. So that